Good morning, Irresistible. Good morning. I know y'all can hear me today, because I can hear me. Well, welcome to our last Sunday of April. Who can believe that May is on Wednesday? Yeah. That means next week Cinco de Mayo when you're here, so just saying. It is my pleasure to be with you again this morning. For those of you on YouTube, welcome. We are so grateful that you've tuned in. For those who do not know who I am or may have forgotten since the last time I was up here, my name is Sarah Ditto, and I am the associate pastor here at Irresistible Church. And it is my pleasure once again to be in front of you sharing a message that God has put together and is just using me to give to all of you. So I hope you get as much out of it as I have gotten in preparing and studying, and probably will still get out of this as we move forward, because there is a lot here. I've promised it would only be at least 27 hours. So let's all stay awake together, all right? For those of you who would like to have the notes, they are out on the Bible app. So if you're here, you can search by location. If you're not, go to our Facebook page and click the link that went live earlier this morning. And then you'll have the notes that we have put in here. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more to the message than that, so fill your own notes in, take notes, and let's see what God has for us today. So today, when I was looking at what was I going to title this message, I had a really funny theme or a funny title for it, but it was just really long. So I shortened it down to the one with the letter. But for those of you who are knowing where I'm going with this, I was going to say that it was 18 pages front and back, but I shortened it down a little bit, and yep. And the reason I went with this is because if you've been here at any moment, you've often heard Pastor Les say that there's a lot of books in the New Testament that are actually letters, and they should be read all at one time. And he's been talking to us about this, especially the last couple of weeks. That you should just sit down and read it. Just because they put chapters in there for all of us to be able to find some of this a little easier does not mean that we get to break that up and only read certain parts of it. You really do owe it to yourself to read it all at once. So when he started saying that again, I was like, you know what, let's see what's in some of these books. And I just turned to Philippians, and I read the letter all at once. And wow, there really is a lot in one letter. It really probably, in their time frame, probably was 18 pages because of how long it really is and how much that Paul actually put in here. But it seems like every time I read it and every time I started studying this letter, there was something else. Like you can see, like in my Bible, I didn't bring it with me today because all my notes are in here. But every time I would be reading through it, I would take a different color of pen. And so there's like all these different colors of pen in this, because it's like every time something else was something that I needed. So we're going to go through, and I found I kept it down to four key things that we're going to talk about today that I found in this letter that Paul wrote to the Philippian church. And I kept it down to 4, but trust me, there's a lot more in there. So you owe it to yourself really to read this and study this on your own as well. But for the sake of time and for the sake of getting everyone out of here before the 27 hours is up, I'm going to keep it at 4 things. So the first one is to keep moving forward even when you're tired. And this one was one that probably spoke well to me this week. And I have some friends in here that I already know that this one will speak to as well, because we've just had a long week. It's been a long week. And it's maybe not even just the week, it's the month, or it's the year, or it's been adulthood. It's just exhausting sometimes. So I started thinking, well, if this one's speaking to me, maybe I'm not the only one that is in a season of exhaustion right now. Maybe I'm not the only one that the most popular words that flow out of my mouth is, I'm just tired, right? It comes out of my mouth a lot, and even to the point where one of my kids asked me something one time, and they go, okay, I'm sorry, I know you're tired. And I'm like, ooh, wow, I must say that a lot. And it made me really think that, okay, I really got to watch, because maybe that's why I'm so tired, because I keep saying how tired I am. But let's look at Philippians 3:16, and it says, we must hold on to the progress that we have already made. And you might be like, okay, what does that have anything to do with being tired? But think about it. When you're tired, how easy is it to want to give up? How easy is it to want to take that step backwards? And God's telling us to hold on to that progress that you've already made. It's easy to think about giving up when you're tired. And I started thinking about this movie that we watched quite often in our house. It's one of our favorites. It's Facing the Giants. And if you haven't watched it, I really do recommend going out and watching it. But there is this scene that is really popular to talk about and to share about. And it's the scene where they're doing like the bear crawls down the football field. And it's a whole football type movie. And this kid's like, well, I could probably maybe make it like halfway through one side of the field or whatever. And the coach blindfolds him and says, do you trust me? Do you trust me? And so the coach talks to him and talks him through, and the kid ends up bear crawling the entire football field before giving up, before being too exhausted to go on. And this kid goes well over what he thought he could because he listened to the voice of his coach who said, don't give up, keep going. And I started thinking about that, and I'm like, well, that's exactly what God's doing to us. He's telling us, you might not see where you're going right now, but don't give up. I've got you. If you listen to my voice, I will take you further. If you listen to what I'm telling you, I will take you further than you could have ever thought you could go. This kid would have given up long before, because you know how it is. I mean, I think about all the different times that you're like running a mile or something for the military, like it just seems like forever. But if you stop thinking about it and you just listen to someone who's coaching you, you go a lot further. And God is saying, I want you to keep going forward even when you feel like you are tired. God has brought us this far, and he's going to continue to take us where he needs us. And even through our exhaustion, we are told to have joy. Philippians 4:4-5 in the Passion says, be cheerful with joyous celebration in every season of life. Let your joy overflow, and let the gentleness be seen in every relationship, for our Lord is ever near. So we are commanded to have joy in every season of our life. God knows what's troubling you, and he is not surprised that there are things that are weary to you. He is not surprised that there are things that are bringing you down. Matthew 11:28 tells us, are you weary, carrying a heavy burden? Well, come to me, and I will refresh your life, for I am your oasis. I love that translation in the Passion. I am your oasis. I mean, wow, God is just saying, he's telling us, he knows that there'll be moments where we're tired, and he knows that we will get weary. But he's not telling us to deal with it alone. He's saying, come to me and listen to me, and I will refresh you. And Paul was telling that to the church, and to the Philippian church. He put it right in that letter. He says that he knows that we get tired, but with God, we can keep moving. The second theme that I really kind of saw in here was have peace even when things go wrong. Whew. Well, peace in the dictionary says it is freedom from disturbance or tranquility. I like that one. Peace means tranquility. Now, yes, we live in a fallen world and in a world that really needs Jesus right now. But just look around you, and you will see evidence of God everywhere you go. It's just up to us to decide how are we going to react when things happen to go wrong. Now, I'm not talking only about the big things. I'm talking about the little things, like you stub your toe. How are you going to react? When you maybe drop a plate when you're putting the dishes away, how are you going to react? When your child maybe puts a little too much of an ingredient in a recipe that she's making, how do you react? That's a fun story. I'll tell you later on that one. When you miss a turn when you're driving, how do you react? It's even in these little things that we are told to have peace, even when the small things go wrong. I mean, we could be talking big things, like you get fired from your job, or maybe you get in a car accident or something. But no matter how big or small, God is telling us to have peace. Philippians 1:10 in the New Living Translation says, "For I want you to understand what really matters. so that you may live pure and blameless lives until the day of Christ's return. I like that. I want you to understand what really matters. How many times do we focus on things that don't really matter? How many times do we focus on that person that maybe we consider our enemy or that person we don't like more than our own lives? How about we focus on where God has us instead of where God has other people? We start to think about other people's lives, though, and we start to think about the things that are going wrong, and we compare our lives to other people's lives and be like, well, God, look what they've got. God, look where they're at. Well, let me tell you what, the saying where they said, you haven't walked a mile in my shoes, is probably a very good statement right now, because you don't know what God has brought them through to get them to where they are. So let's not compare our lives, and let's remember to have peace wherever God has us. Just last week, Pastor Les gave us a message on dealing with difficult people. If you missed that one, go back and watch that after this, because he really brought up a lot of good points about how to deal with a lot of those people that we would consider a difficult person and how to not become a difficult person ourselves. No matter what is going on in your life, no matter what is trying to take the peace from your life, the best thing that we can do is to stay prayed up. Philippians 1:28 says, then you will never be shaken or intimidated by the opposition that rises up against you. How cool is that? You will never be shaken or intimidated by that opposition that rises up against you. They're not saying if it happens. They're saying when it happens. Keep that in mind. There is a lot in this world that is going to try and steal your peace. There is a lot in this world that is going to try to overcome you. But we are told that we cannot be shaken because we have God. Let's stop overthinking the problems in our lives. I know we all do it. I'm going to throw myself right in there. We start overthinking about things. Well, how's this going to happen? How's this going to work out? It's not always for us to figure out. It's for us to pray about. We need to turn a situation we tend to turn a situation that is something really small into something that is so much more than it actually is. How do you react when you have to face that one person that you just don't want to talk to? You know who I'm talking about. That one person that you just never wanted to see again. God is telling you to turn to him, and he will make sure that you are not shaken or intimidated by anything that rises up against you. We're told to have peace and to be joyful, and we are told to show God's love everywhere we go. We are told to be the light of Christ in every situation. In every situation, not just the good ones. And if you wonder about this a little bit, think about it. Paul wrote this letter to the Philippian church, and he was in prison when he wrote it. And he's talking to us about being joyful. He's telling us to have peace no matter what is going wrong in our lives. And he's in prison when he's telling us. I'm telling you what, if Paul can have peace in prison and have joy while he's in prison, then we can have peace here in Ohio. Because we're not in prison. We have not been imprisoned for being a Christian. We have not been persecuted the way that he was for being a Christian. So if Paul can do it, I think we can too. The next theme that popped out to me was to be strong even when you feel weak. Now this one can be really tough. And I think it kind of piggybacks off the first one of being tired as well. But I'm also not going to stand up here and tell you that life is not going to be hard or difficult or have moments that we just don't know how to get through them. And I'm not even going to pretend that I even have it all together either. So don't think that. Just know that while there are many things that drag us down And while there is so much that can make us feel weak or to feel defeated, Philippians 4:13 says, "For I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength." Now this is my verse. This is my verse. This has gotten me through so many things in this world, because there has been a lot that has happened that I just did not know how I would make it through. And I'm up here to tell you that I did not make it through on my own. It was because I relied on God to give me the strength. There's been so much in this life that I have not been able to do, but I did it because of God's strength. There are moments when life will bring you down, a lot of moments where you feel weak or weary, and you just don't feel like you have the strength to take one more step. And that right there is where God can move. That right there is when God is able to give you his strength and let you go on, to help you go on. It's when we get out of our own way and we surrender ourselves to God and we say, I can't do this on my own. There's a new song out by Katie Nicole and Naomi Rain, and it's called My God Can. And I just love listening to this song because she talks about, I can't do this and I can't do that, but my God can. And with my God's strength, he's going to do it through me. We cannot do this on our own, but with God we can. If you haven't heard that song yet, I do recommend there to look that one up later too and listen to it, because it's very good, and it'll be a good motivator to get us going into our Mondays tomorrow. But let's look at Philippians 4:13 again, but I'm going to use it in the Passion Translation. And it says, I find that the strength of Christ's explosive power infuses me to conquer every difficulty or to master all the things. Christ's explosive power infuses me. How awesome is that? God knew what we were going to deal with in our lives. He knew that he was making sure we were born at the right time to endure what we are enduring. He wasn't shocked that we are here today, and he's not surprised when we feel like we're too weak to go on. God had Paul put this sentence in this letter to the Philippian church, knowing that Paul was in prison when he wrote it, and knowing that it wouldn't be Paul's own strength that got him out, or that would change his situation. So those moments when you feel weak, when you just don't know how to go on, those moments when you almost are crying out, why is this even happening to me? That's when God says to rely on him, and he will give you the strength. And we may not know right now why we're dealing with what we're dealing with. And it may not be to the other side till we figure out why. But God has a reason and a purpose for everything. And sometimes it may just be showing other people how God can move in your life. And that leads us right into the fourth point that Paul wrote in his letter to the Philippian church, and it is to be happy even when times are tough. Now, I can hear it already grumbling and complaining and reminding me that I don't know how tough your life is, and that there's no way to be happy with what's going on in your life right now. So I'm not going to talk. I'm going to let Paul talk again. And he says in Philippians 1, he says, "For God has graciously given you the privilege not only to believe in Christ, but to suffer for him. For you have been called by him to endure the conflict in the same way that I have endured it. For you know I am not giving up." I've read these verses a lot this week and in so many different translations because there is just so much in those two verses. But graciously given the privilege to suffer for God. And I think about Paul, and I think about his situation, and that he's writing this letter in the middle of his storm. He's still in his storm. He's not out of it. He's not looking back over and saying, that was rough. He's still in it, and he's writing this to us to tell us to be joyful. Paul's not all woe is me. Oh, don't you know how hard my life is? Well, you think your life's tough? Well, listen to mine. How many times do we try to one-up the problems when someone's talking to us? That's not what Paul's doing here. He's saying, you know what? I know life is hard, but listen to this. Sing your praises to God and encourage others in the meantime. When you're in your storm, he's telling us to be joyful and to be grateful that God is with us, that to know that God's given us a strength, and to still be an encouragement to someone else. Well, how many times do we feel like writing letters of encouragement to other people while we're still in our storm? I don't know that I can say I have. But Paul did, and he's a good example, and I think we all need to learn from that. He's telling us to count it a privilege that we get to suffer for Christ. When's the last time we counted it a privilege? We all know that there will be suffering in this life, and we all know that just because we have given our lives to God does not mean that everything is all perfect. Okay, we live in a fallen world, and that is just not how it is. But God is telling us in Deuteronomy, he says, do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord will personally go ahead of you. He will be with you, and he will never fail you, nor will he abandon you. I like it. He will personally go ahead of you. Talk about a great promise. So when you feel like you're in that storm, remember that God is telling us, I'm already ahead of you. I've already got this. Just keep your eyes focused on me. Keep your ears focused on me. Listen to what I have. And don't look at what's around you. And that is how Paul was able to tell the Philippian church in this letter to be happy no matter what. All these things that Paul says, and it's easy for us to read it sometimes and then be like, oh, well, he was writing that to them. That was for the Philippian church, you know. But I have to often think that if Paul was still writing letters, the American church would probably be getting one right about now. Just saying. We feel like maybe Paul didn't understand what we were going to be dealing with here in 2024. I mean, his letter was written in AD 60 to 62. So how does he know what we're going to deal with here? But you have to remember that God gave him the words, and he knew that we would still be reading this letter in 2024. And he knew what we needed. So in a way, I guess he did write a letter to the American church, if you'll go out and read it. Look here at Philippians 2. It says, I hope, Paul's talking again, to send Timothy to you soon for a visit. Then he can cheer me up by telling me how you are getting along. Did you see that? He's hoping that Timothy can cheer him up with the news. Look, we all need cheered up at times. Paul is telling us to be happy in the midst of it. But at the same time, he's also saying, this act would cheer me up still. Which means, you know, he is still human. He's still dealing with a lot. And no matter what we're going through, it's okay to need some cheering up every once in a while. Psalm 94:19 in the Message says, when I was upset and beside myself, you calmed me down and you cheered me up. God knew we would need some cheering up in this life. God knew that just saying, hey, be happy, is like telling a woman to calm down when she's mad. It doesn't happen very easily, right? He knows that he's telling us, I know you're going to need cheered up. I know this is what you're going to need. So I'm giving you everything you need right here. So to wrap all of this up, I'm going to be real with y'all. Nowhere in the Bible does it tell us that you will not have any hardships. Nowhere does it say you won't have rough days. It does not tell us that we will not have moments of weakness. It does not tell us that we won't get sad. And it certainly does not tell us that we won't get tired. However, it does say that you can pray through your hardships. It tells us what to do when your day just is not good. It does tell us how to pray when we feel weak. It tells us who to turn to when we feel sad. And it tells us who is going to give us strength when we feel weak. This letter to the Philippian church is one that talks about joy no matter what we see. And Paul tells us in Philippians 3, it says, I regret nothing. I regard it all as nothing compared to the delight of experiencing Jesus Christ as my Lord. All of his hardships, he regards them as nothing compared to the delight of knowing Jesus. I think we got some big shoes to be filling here. It's when you get to that point when everything else means nothing compared to knowing our Lord, that's when we gain that new perspective on life. Because let me tell you this, with Jesus, we can be truly joyful. And we can be truly strong. We can truly find peace. And we can truly be happy. But it's all because of our Jesus. It's all because of our Jesus. And he says he'll make sure that that happens. And I know it's been said here before. I've already said it a couple times. But I really do say, you owe it to yourselves to go in and read these letters that Paul wrote. And read them as a letter. And read them at one time. And sit down and put your phone somewhere else. Don't get distracted by it. And actually just sit down and read these letters. One time, just sit down and read it. Because there's so much in there. And while I got you 4 points in here, there's so much more that I didn't even touch on that Paul is telling us that it can be so helpful to each and every one of us today. God is still showing me a lot in here. And I bet you that you'll find that if you can sit down and read these, that you'll see that, yeah, we might feel tired physically, but spiritually, we need to stay prayed up. Yeah. Spiritually, we need to remember that God is our strength. And we need to spread that joy with everyone that we see. So with that, I'm going to say thank you all so much for being here with me today. I definitely got you out earlier than I said. Please continue to pray for Pastor Les and Pastor Grace as they are still out having a very relaxing time. I think this is the first time in a long time I've had a text from my mom that said, we are actually relaxing and I feel relaxed. And so keep praying for them, pray for their travels as they come back, because we look forward to having them back with us next week. I do not know the title of Pastor Les's message for next week, so I guess we'll all be surprised together. So YouTube, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to be here in front of you. I challenge you as well to go out and read those letters that Paul wrote and see what God's saying to you. If you feel so led to give, then there's a donate button on our Facebook page that you can go to. And we look forward to seeing you again next week around the same time. And for all of you amazing